Hello. Hello, Linda. Welcome
Hi,
back.
thank you.
I'm glad that you're sticking with this, and I know these first couple weeks can be a little bit um, not exactly what we think about therapy because I'm trying to get some of these background information about you that I can then maybe use down the road when we get to more of a proper therapy. So the first thing I need to do is just very briefly go over confidentiality with you, which is something that we share here in the office, that nothing that you say will leave the office. I can tell no one about it unless there's just a couple of exceptions. If there's a very strong reason to believe you might harm yourself or others, or also child or animal abuse. But other than those exceptions, it's confidential. So you can say things about whoever, friends, relatives. You don't need to guard yourself because Um, I wouldn't, and I can't share it with them. Now, is that pretty clear? Do you have any questions on confidentiality?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Um, and Now and do a very brief part of a test where I just sort of get a basic sense of your your how attuned you are just to the time and place. Very brief. Where are you speaking from?
I'm home.
And what city is that in?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned that last week, and I couldn't remember if it was Scottsdale or Phoenix. Okay, Scottsdale, Arizona. And what time is it there? Or ballpark?
10 o'clock.
Okay, 10 o'clock. Great. And Have there been any changes since last week when we met with your overall mood or thoughts or emotions?
No, I'm still pretty frustrated about the political atmosphere in our country. And
Mm-hmm.
some days I'm still pretty angry about it and feel frustrated. So that part, I find a few days where I don't watch TV, I do better.
Okay, so if you don't see the information, a little bit easier to make it through the day.
Kind of, yeah, except I tend to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it and worrying about it and writing letters in my head and trying to think about what I could do to make this world a bit better.
Well, that actually leads me to a question that I wasn't planning, but hearing this from you, I have another client who has some of these frustrations, except they seem to have a harder time um, describing it in terms of emotion, and then they also seem to have a harder time in terms of what you just said, writing a letter, taking some action on whatever level in order to feel that there's more involvement. And I'm wondering if you might want to sort of play therapist and help me help them with this issue, because it sounds like you are quite emotionally attached to it in terms of how you feel about it, if there's anything other than anger or frustration, and then what sorts of things you've been doing to get through it.
Well, I have written my senators, and I write on Facebook, and I express myself, and I've joined a couple organizations like Pantsuit Nation in Arizona, and we talk, people talk, and we're looking for things to do. We're talking about things we could do. Um, but again, you do feel pretty powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this week I've been really frustrated about local issues here in my I have a homeowners association, and the president of that looks like he went to the Trump school of bullying, and so he ran a meeting that was so obnoxious, and he lied, and he did so many things that I'm real frustrated about that. So I've had to deal with board members and talk about what's acceptable. And then we had some problems here, so I've been working with my city. So I've been more focused on local issues this week because there's things that my city had to take care of that they haven't been taking care of. So I've been working on that. And it is satisfying because I'm getting something taken care of that nobody else could seem to get taken care of. So that's satisfying, but I'm motivated by anger.
Okay.
Anger motivates me, but so I stay in it. But I have a lot of friends that are pretty depressed right now, and some people don't want to talk about it. It's hard. This is a hard time.
Okay. Yeah, well, when you mentioned that you were motivated by anger, it sounds like that's preferable to these other people you mentioned, where there's almost a sort of, you're almost immobilized by either anger or sadness. You're not leading.
Well, I have more friends that are just thinking it's better to not think about it, and not that they can't do anything about it, not to think about it.
Yeah.
To enjoy the flowers and enjoy what's around and not focus on this issue. I just have a more difficult time with it, but I know that I can only do so much, and then, I don't know.
Okay. Well, this can be a recurring topic for us because it really does involve the political and very much the personal and emotional, where people are there's some struggle. There's people are having a hard time talking to other members of their family who might have voted a different way, and all sorts of rifts that it's probably best to be aware of as we can be, and then be able to decide what to do with them. It sounds like you have a full-time job over there, almost, with all of these activities. So we'll return to this, the very last part of this test, but we will shelf this for next week. So I'd just like to get a sense, this is not related to the politics part, but a sense of your, this is really just in the past week and recently, if you feel that your sense of safety has it all changed?
Boy, I don't think I guess I don't personalize it and think it's my sense of safety, though I'm concerned about safety for a lot of different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't felt it like mine, but I haven't, had a swastika painted on my house. So I don't know. I'm feeling safe as I felt the week before. I'm not feeling more unsafe. I just think that there's more things in our society that's not safe.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll move on to another very brief sort of exercise that, and it doesn't need to be related at all to what we've discussed so far. It's what we call an early recollection, where I'll just ask you to take a moment to think about one of the most vivid memories you have, as young as possible, 6, 7, 8, somewhere, wherever it happens to be, and then when you have that, you can let me know, and I'm gonna write that down, and might be able to work through that.
Okay, it was when I was 8.
Okay.
And it was the day that my father went to court to change our last name, and that when I went to school in the morning, I had one name, and at the end of the next day, I had to go to school and have a different name.
Mm-hmm.
I found that traumatic. I wasn't happy that we were changing our name. I think I thought maybe I was losing a part of me or something.
Oh, okay. So when you said how sort of upset you were, was any of that related to the school part or the public change in your name, or mainly uh, sort of your own having to deal with that?
Um, well, I felt that in some ways I had an identity as a Jewish person, and I felt that if I changed schools, that I would have to wear a big Jewish star because nobody would know this was a Jewish name. So I was quite aware of that at 8 years old. I don't know why, but so it had something to do with my identity. I just, and it was like taking something away from me. That's who I'd been for 8 years, and now I had to have a different name. And I remember asking my father why we had to do that, and he said my uncle was changing his name, and so my dad didn't think there should be two brothers with different names. So, and it was until, years later I realized that part of the reason he changed it was because of the anti-Semitism in Minnesota, and he wasn't able to belong to his professional organization, and just the name change made a big difference.
Okay, so it had some slightly different uses and effects for different people. I just wanted to get back when you mentioned when you said you felt this strong loss of identity, Jewish identity, and you mentioned that you were 8, and which seems it's impressive to me because I don't think I knew anything at that age. But how did that make you feel? Like were you in your bedroom thinking about it or crying or any
No,
sort talking to?
I was sad.
Okay.
I was sad. It was a loss for me. I wasn't feeling like I was losing my Jewish identity. I just felt that that maybe I guess in a way I wasn't losing it, but I felt like somebody else wouldn't know that or something, and that I guess that was a part of me. I wanted to be known. So
Okay.
that was, I don't know. No, I was sad. I don't know if I could say anger at the time. I was just really sad and didn't want to have them do that.
And do you see any connection, and you might not, between uh, this sort of sudden change of identity back when you were 8 with any events that have happened later in your life? I'm not sure if you took the name of your husband for the very literal.
Yeah, yes, and I still think about that because I still would like my name back. I still think I didn't change my name when I got divorced because didn't want my kids to have a different name than me. But I still think about it even now. I think about if I would die, do I want to, and if I were buried, which I'm not, I'm thinking about whether I'd want to be buried or not. If I died, would I want to, I still I don't think I ever felt in my skin with the last name that I have, because I probably should have kept it, my name. But it wasn't, that's not what was done at the time. So I feel like my name is part of me.
Mm-hmm.
At least when I'm in Minnesota, and it's important to me that I use that name with my last name because I guess it brings recognition to who I am. Here in Arizona, my maiden name wouldn't mean anything to anybody. But in Minnesota, it did. It would identify me as part of my family.
Right. The same family that shortened the name, but that's still your family name. You have to you like to hold on to some of that part of the past or identity. And
Mm-hmm.
and now I'd just like to ask uh, before we get to just a couple more of the general questions. Uh, because we've been talking about your strong feelings, seemingly um, about wanting to be who you are, wanting others to see you for who you are without having to wear that, Jewish star, or without having to explain your maiden name. And it made me a bit curious if that opened up to any issues that you're experiencing right now in terms of heightened emotion about identity or identity loss.
Right at this moment?
Well, or in this week or so.
Well, now I have a problem in, I guess, an identity thing is the age that I'm older, and I look older, and people see me as an old person, but I don't feel like an old person inside,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a frustration to me that how I feel inside isn't how I look outside. So that I guess a form of identity. People are identifying me. I mean, it's nice when they want to lift up my bag on an airplane for me, but sometimes people will ask questions like, can you walk up the step or something that
Mm-hmm.
makes you realize that I'm looking old when I don't feel old. So there's I don't know maybe an ambiguity about or an incongruency about how I feel and how I'm seen.
Yes, I was thinking disconnect, but I like ambiguity. Yeah, this idea that your sort of self-image uh, is not necessarily going to be reconciled with the outside world.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and it's a little frustrating for me because I know sometimes I'm talking to people as if I'm their age or whatever, and they're probably looking at me thinking about what is this old woman saying to us. So, yeah, I kind of struggle with that. So it's an identity issue as well.
Okay. Well, that's very good. And what strikes me in all of these stories, with the two with the name and this one, is even though you might not have liked it or like it at all, that underneath it, inside, there's a strong sense of self, and it might be injured, but it sounds like you have a sense of your own identity.
Well, it's been one of my big problems in life is not having a sense of self or not feeling a sense of self. Um, in some ways, I don't know if I've felt that. I hadn't thought about it in terms of what I'm saying, but
Mm-hmm.
myself is always feeling confused to me. And then this part now where I feel different than what I look like or than what my age is I don't know. Maybe it is about self. Um,
Um,
there's some things I have a strong sense of self about, and some things not.
mhm.
I will fight my city. Like I got something done this week because I fight the city, so I know that I'm competent at doing things like that.
Mhm. Okay, and for sense of self, in part, I was some of the patients I see don't really know who they are day to day. They're at a much lower level of functioning, but some of that question can help that, and sometimes, like you mentioned, a lifelong struggle. If it's one that allows you to still lead a life that's satisfactory, that could be different from someone who can't keep a job or a relationship because of that sort of shifting identity. But it sounded like yours was, maybe steady is better than strong. I'm not even sure if steady is right, because it sounds like you've mentioned different areas that are stronger than others. Well, so this last question would be, um, it's known by some of my colleagues as the question for the kind of therapy we practice, which is, how do you think your life might be different if the biggest issue wasn't there. And it could be the politics or it could be a different thing. But if sort of the biggest pain, the biggest nuisance, the biggest personal, emotional issue for you, if you could have that vanish, how would things...
Right, that's a really hard. That's a really hard question. Very difficult question.
It's a very
I don't know
speculative.
I can,
yeah,
I'm not sure
okay.
what I'm going to come up with on that.
And we can come back later to it also. So it's no pressure.
Yeah, really I guess I need to give that some thought.
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, no, we can pick that up. And I've had patients come back weeks later and sort of modify it because it's about imagining really a future, a different self world, and so that can be tricky. But I'd like to ask before we close if you have any questions regarding today's session, and then for next week, I hope to be able to have...
I'm not exactly sure about this thing. I need to think about. You're asking me about an issue that... You're asking me what my life would be if I didn't have one of my biggest issues with me, but we haven't talked about what those biggest issues might be. Is that correct? I don't...
Yes. No, we haven't. I mean,
So you want me to think about issues that I have that you think are stopping me from...
Well, the reason I had
things?
mentioned some of the politics was that it reminded me of last week when you mentioned a reason you came in was a general feeling of wanting to do more in general and sometimes feeling too angry, too sad. And I didn't want to sort of force you to pick what I say as the issue because I've known you, not long enough to do that. So it was really an opportunity for you to say maybe it is a question of powerlessness. It could be a question of identity, or it might be a whole other thing about, I was never as tall as I wanted to be, or, that sort of thing. But then something that would allow us to imagine how things might be improved.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll think about that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And yes, you're with a lot of clients. Okay. Thank you for coming in, Linda.
Okay. Bye.